No, the the author is the author is reading from the autobiography of David Smith. So in 13, part 13 after the Revco job, I went back to Ohio for a while, but I was still looking for another job in New York City. In New York City, I met Daniel Petricig and his girlfriend, which led me to meeting his brother Kenny Petricig. Daniel Petricig lived at First Avenue and First Street. We used to call it First and First, center of the universe. Daniel and his girlfriend had gotten addicted to heroin, so I could see the dark reality of their lives eaten up by addiction and the way the couple shared in the problem. Their relationship was based on a mutual interest in heroin. They wanted to quit, but the power of the presence of the pusher nearby was too much for an addicted to bear. To quit, they had to move to Cleveland just to get away from their connections to the drug. They were probably financially ruined as well. Daniel eventually quit in Cleveland, and I saw a play in Lakewood where he was the producer. But I became more acquainted with his brother Kenny, so I went back to Ohio, became more involved with the circle of friends in Cleveland area. Anna, my sister, was living in Cleveland Heights in an old Victorian house on the upper floor. She was writing poetry and was in a poetry club in Cleveland. I sat in At a sat sing in Cleveland. I met Sally Reydman. Sally was a provocative, dramatic, and perhaps charming Jewish girl from Shaker Heights. In fact, she graduated Shaker Heights High School in 1979. Her father was Dr. Melvin Reydman, who was a heart surgeon who died on December 18th, 2011. Her mother's name was Gladys. They lived in a large Tudor-style house in Shaker Heights. She was an artist. Why do you have to say anybody's name? This is the story of my life. I found on the internet that she had a show in Ohio at the Dead Horse Gallery in Lakewood, Ohio in 2002, which was described as being humorously macabre. A series called How I Died, Depictions of Fantasy Deaths. Humorously macabre kind of describes Sally. She had a pretty face and black hair. She was also a bit short, maybe 5'2". Her silly humor was certainly entertaining. What she really wanted was a roommate. She wanted to move to New York and saw me as a way to get there. When I got a call from Graham Stewart for a job in New York, Sally's plan was for us to be roommates in New York in the East Village, so off me and Sally went back to New York. She dressed like another clone of Madonna and Desperately Seeking Susan. She and her friend Alice Albert dressed and acted like Madonna and Desperately Seeking Susan. And our apartment pretty much looked like the Susan's apartment in that movie. We got an apartment at 10th Street and Avenue B, not far from the Life Cafe. So I was one of the few people wearing a suit and working on Wall Street from East Village. I would walk from my apartment in my suit to the subway at Astor Place to take the train to Whitehall Street downtown. I had a job with Graham Stewart. Graham Stewart was another Brit. Not only did he have an British accent, he had much more with class and style. He dressed British, talked British, decorated his office eloquently. Plus, he was an actor and producer. He had an elegant two-room office on 1 Whitehall Street for his New York office of commodity appointments. It all reminded me of the phrase, "You should dress British and think Yiddish to be a success." Hmm. Hmm. There's more about him in the book, but we won't read it all. He was also a member of the Players Club down in Gramercy Park. He went there a number of times. He would take me along on his meetings, even with actors. The office was on a high floor and had a view of the Statue of Liberty. The furniture was antique and was impressive artwork on the wall. After Rufko, I needed another job, and he needed someone to man the New York office. I would be just be alone in the office in New York. Even my business card was elegant at the time. I learned that first impressions mattered in business. Graham clearly had people skills, being an actor, and used them in his business. At the time, he was always talking about Anne Twomey and how she was producing the Tom Torpor play Nuts in London at the Whitehall Theatre. When I met Anne Twomey, I was probably too shy to talk to her, but being in New York, I had to learn a number of skills, including talking fast, not being quiet or shy, directness, getting to the point. After years of living in New York, no one could imagine that I was once shy. It was just a matter of effectiveness and practicality not to be. I could have learned this from Graham Stewart. Graham Stewart was really more interested in the theater business and got much more excited about it than the commodity headhunter business. There's my business card from Commodity Appointments, and there's Anne Twomey. And actually, you see in the play Nuts, Barbara Streisand played the role in Nuts, but that's Anne Twomey in the London production. I had gone to New York before Sally came and got a 1 month sublet at 83rd and Columbus. One day I was riding the train home from downtown. One day I was riding the train home from downtown, the A train. The girl sitting beside me was crying over the fact that her dog had died. I probably appeared sympathetic. She claimed I looked like someone she knew. I assured her I didn't know her, but she insisted maybe she should know me. But she insisted maybe she should know me. Well, fate had it that we were destined to get off at the same spot at 81st and Central Park West. I was living at 83rd and Columbus, and she was living at 87th and Columbus. I explained to her not to worry, that I had a dog and lived nearby, and she should meet my dog. Little did she know that neither the dog was mine or the apartment. The dog belonged to the apartment owner I was subletting from, and I was only staying like a month. The girl from the train was my first wife, Maria Danzilo, so we met long enough to start dating. She liked me and was a little dismayed when I moved all the way downtown to the East Village with Sally, while she lived all the way up on the Upper West Side. Plus, there was the fact that I was living with Sassy Sally. Sally assured her we were just roommates, and Maria enjoyed coming down to the East Village to visit me. She was a bit of a bohemian herself. She was also a poet and had taken literature in college before studying law. She had gone to Brooklyn Law School. She had studied a year or a summer in Oxford, England. Maria and I later traveled to England, visiting London and Oxford. The photo below of me by the water on the bench is at Oxford. I was impressed with going into a pub that was 500 years old. I loved Oxford and the thought of all the classical studies going on there. In some ways, I wish my life was different. I was a lifelong scholar studying classics at Oxford, and I'd spent all of my time in the library in Oxford studying Sanskrit. As a music student, I despised business and thought of it as meaningless busyness. But poverty forced me to do something to make money. Well, anyways, I'm going to stop. I usually stop there. before making money. I was reading part 12, 13 actually, stop part 13, where I'd read about meeting Maria and working with Graham Stewart. I worked at commodity appointments, and I'm in Oxford with Maria. I met Maria on the A train. I am reading from the autobiography of David, Memoir to 40, David myself.